I found Vesper Dempsey hiding in my car at 11:47 p.m., which was not the strangest thing I had seen after an ER shift, but it was easily the one most likely to ruin my relationship with her brother. The parking garage under the Ashbourne Hotel was mostly empty by then, all concrete shadows, humming lights, and the faint echo of some charity band still playing 3 floors above like rich people needed brass instruments to feel generous. I had left the event early because I had work at 6 in the morning, and because watching Vesper pretend to be fine beside Lowen Pierce had started to feel like standing too close to a fire alarm nobody else could hear. Bram had invited me. Technically, my best friend liked to say hospital people needed social contact before we became furniture with badges. I told him I already had a deeply fulfilling relationship with an MRI schedule, but he made me come anyway. Then he spent half the night glaring at Lowen. His mother Calla spent the other half pretending everything was elegant, and Vesper smiled like a woman holding a glass sculpture together with her bare hands. I unlocked my car from 10 feet away, heard the chirp bounce off the garage pillars, and saw movement in the passenger seat. My first thought was break-in. My second was that anyone robbing a 2016 dark blue Honda with a cracked cup holder deserved the emotional consequences. Then I opened the driver's door and saw Vesper curled low in the front seat, her knees pulled close, heels off, one hand pressed against her chest like she was trying to keep her breathing quiet. She wore a black satin dress that looked designed for cameras and completely wrong for hiding under a dashboard. Her hair, which had been pinned smooth at the event, had started to fall around her face, and one earring was missing. For a second, she looked up at me with the same stunned expression I probably had, both of us caught in a scene neither of us knew how to explain. I said her name because apparently my brain had dropped every other tool. Vesper swallowed and looked past me toward the elevators, then back into my face. She asked if I could close the door. Not drive. Not question. Just close the door. I did it before I knew whether that was the right thing, sliding into the driver's seat and shutting out the garage air with a muted thud. The car became smaller, immediately. Too small for the smell of her perfume, the faint tremor in her hands, the memory of all the times I had told myself she was Bram's sister first, last, and forever. I asked if she was hurt. She shook her head, then gave a humorless little laugh and said not in a way the ER could bill for. That was Vesper, even then, sharp under pressure, private even when unraveling. I wanted to reach for her hand. Instead, I put both of mine on the steering wheel like the car might move without permission if I did not supervise it. She said, "Can I stay with you?" The words were quiet, but they hit the inside of the car like a locked door giving way. I turned to look at her fully then, which was a mistake, and also impossible not to do. I had known Vesper for 7 years, since Bram brought me home from college one Thanksgiving and she was 19, barefoot in the kitchen, arguing with her mother about whether cranberry sauce counted as food or tradition. Back then, she had been Bram's little sister in the safe. Obvious way. Then years passed. She became the woman who coordinated high-end hotel events without ever looking impressed by expensive nonsense. The woman who remembered I hated olives. The woman who once asked me in a hospital hallway if I ever got tired of being calm for everyone else. I had laughed that off because laughing was safer than answering. Bram trusted me. That mattered. But sitting beside her in the dim garage, watching her fight tears with the stubbornness of a woman who had already used up public grace for the night, I knew trust was not the only thing in the car with us. I asked what happened upstairs. Vesper looked down at her bare feet, one heel tucked beside the floor mat, the other lying crooked near her bag like it had surrendered first. She said Lowen cornered her near the service hallway after the donor speech, using that soft public voice men use when they want witnesses to think they are patient. He told her everyone could see she was overwhelmed, that their breakup had embarrassed both families long enough, that she needed to stop punishing him for loving her in a way she was too emotional to appreciate. I felt my jaw tighten. Lowen Pierce had money, hair that obeyed him, and the kind of smile that made older women call him impressive. I had never trusted a man whose apologies sounded like press releases. Vesper kept talking, faster now, like the words had been waiting behind her ribs. Her mother told her not to make the night difficult. Bram would have started a war if she called him. So she left the ballroom, took the service elevator down, saw my car because she knew where I always parked, and got in before she could talk herself out of it. That last part stopped me. She knew where I parked. I tried not to let that mean anything. I failed. My phone buzzed in the cup holder, Bram's name lighting the screen. Vesper saw it and went still. The call rang once, twice, 3 times. I should have answered. Bram was my best friend, and his sister was sitting barefoot in my passenger seat asking to come home with me. There were rules for that, or there should have been. But Vesper whispered, "Please don't tell him where I am yet." And the fear in her voice was not fear of Bram hurting her. It was fear of becoming a family emergency before she had even decided what shape her own pain had. I let the call go to voicemail. The silence afterward felt like a choice I would have to answer for. I started the engine. Vesper looked at me, startled, and asked where we were going. I told her away from here first, details after. She let out a breath so small I almost missed it, then leaned back against the seat like the car had become the first room all night that did not require her to perform. As I pulled out of the garage, the hotel lights slid across her face in pale bands, and I kept my eyes on the ramp because looking too long felt like taking advantage of a moment she had not meant to give me. Still, when we reached the street and the city opened dark and wet around us, I knew the truth with a clarity that made my hands tighten on the wheel. Vesper had not hidden in my car by accident, and I was not driving her away from that hotel as only Bram's loyal friend. I drove for 3 blocks without asking another question, which may have been the most useful thing I did all night. The city was wet from earlier rain, the pavement catching pieces of hotel light and traffic signals, turning downtown into a smear of red, gold, and dark glass. Vesper sat beside me with her knees angled toward the door, bare feet tucked under the edge of the seat, one hand still gripping her phone even though she had not looked at it since Bram called. My own phone lit up again in the cup holder. Bram. Then again, Bram. Then a text came through that I did not open, because opening it would mean choosing a side before I understood what I was protecting her from. Vesper watched the screen glow and fade, her face turned toward the window. She said she was sorry. I told her not to apologize for needing air. She gave me a tired little smile and said hiding in my car felt like a more dramatic version of needing air. I said the passenger seat had seen worse emotional choices, though that was mostly a lie unless you counted me eating gas station sushi after a double shift. I kept the heat low because she was shivering and pretending not to. That was one of the first things I had noticed about Vesper years ago. She could turn discomfort into posture. She sat straighter when she was hurt, smiled cleaner when she was angry, and made jokes when she was close to cracking. People mistook that for control. I worked in an emergency room. I knew control when it was real, and I knew when it was just a hand pressed hard against a wound. I asked if she wanted water. She said she was fine, which answered nothing. I pulled into the 24-hour pharmacy on Broad Street and told her I needed aspirin. She looked at me like she knew exactly what I was doing, but she did not argue. Inside, under those brutal fluorescent lights that made every human being look recently assembled, I bought bottled water, blister pads, and a pack of those soft socks they kept near the travel-size toothpaste. When I came back, she stared at the bag and said I had emergency room energy even off the clock. I told her somebody had to be prepared when hotel shoes declared war. She let me hand her the water. The blister pads took more negotiation, mostly because letting me notice the raw marks on her heels felt more intimate than either of us wanted to admit. I did not touch her feet. I just passed her the box and looked out the windshield while she fixed what she could. That mattered, I think. Not because I was heroic, but because every man upstairs had apparently been trying to guide, correct, manage, or narrate her. The least I could do was let her put on her own bandages. When we pulled back onto the street, she spoke without looking at me. She said Lowen had waited until she was alone near the service hallway, then smiled like they were still an attractive couple having a temporary misunderstanding. He told her she was making the breakup harder than it needed to be, that people were worried, that her mother was embarrassed, and that Bram's anger was not helping her think clearly. I hated the phrase immediately. Men like Lowen loved accusing women of not thinking clearly whenever those women stopped agreeing with them. Vesper's voice stayed even until she got to her mother. Calla Dempsey had found her near the ballroom doors and told her, quietly, that this was not the night to make a scene. Vesper laughed once when she told me that, but it had no humor in it. She said the strange part was that she had not been making a scene. She had been standing perfectly still, wearing the dress her mother liked, smiling at donors, letting Lowen's friends hug her like they were welcoming her back from a short illness. She said it was amazing how many people could call themselves concerned while slowly pushing you toward the exact thing you were trying to escape. I did not say anything for a while, because I knew my anger would not help if it arrived bigger than her voice. Finally, I told her that leaving was not a scene. Sometimes leaving was the first honest thing a person did all night. She turned then, just enough for me to catch her reflection in the side window. Her eyes were bright, but she did not cry. Bram called again when we were 10 minutes from my apartment. The screen lit the car blue. Vesper closed her eyes. I asked if she wanted to answer, and she said if she heard his voice right now, she would either lie or let him turn this into a rescue mission. I understood Bram well enough to know she was right. He loved like a man guarding a door with his whole body, which was admirable until the person inside needed to leave. I let the call go. The silence afterward was not peaceful. It was full of consequence. Vesper said I did not have to do this. I told her I knew. She said Bram was going to hate it. I told her Bram hated many things with confidence, including valet parking, raw onions, and the concept of decorative pillows. That got a real laugh out of her, small and surprised. It eased something in the car for maybe 3 seconds. Then she looked at me and asked if I was only being kind because she was his sister. I should have answered quickly. Instead, I turned into my apartment lot and parked under the one lamp that always flickered like it was considering a horror career. My building was nothing special. Brick, 3 floors, bad landscaping, and a stairwell that smelled faintly of detergent and old pizza. I could feel Vesper waiting beside me. The truthful answer was complicated and therefore dangerous. Yes, Bram mattered. Yes, loyalty mattered. Yes, I would have helped his sister no matter what. But no, that was not the whole reason my hands had stayed tight on the wheel the entire drive. No, that was not why I had memorized the way her voice changed when she stopped performing. I told her I was helping because she asked me to. She looked disappointed, maybe because that was decent but too clean. Then I added that Bram, being my best friend, was the reason I was trying so hard not to make this about everything else I felt. Her breath caught, and I immediately wished I could unsay it and was relieved I could not. We climbed the stairs slowly, her heels in one hand, pharmacy socks on her feet, my jacket around her shoulders because the night had turned cold. At my door, I paused, with the key in the lock. That was when she touched my sleeve. Not grabbing, just stopping me before I could hide inside another practical motion. She said she did not want to come inside, as Bram's sister, or Lowen's problem, or a charity event disaster I was too decent to leave in a parking garage. She wanted to come inside as herself, even if herself was currently barefoot, furious, embarrassed, and borrowing my jacket. I looked at her hand on my sleeve, then at her face, and understood that opening my apartment door was suddenly not about shelter. It was about whether I could let her be a woman in front of me without immediately putting her back into the safest category. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and stepped aside. My apartment was not ready for Vesper Dempsey, which was another way of saying my apartment was not ready for any woman who might notice things. It was clean, because hospital people learn early that chaos is easier to survive when at least your dishes are done. But clean did not mean warm. The living room had a gray couch, a narrow bookshelf, a coffee table with one coaster, and a lamp I bought because the old one died, not because I had an opinion about light. There were no framed photos on the walls, just 2 prints Bram had once called emotionally non-committal rectangles. Vesper stepped inside, still wrapped in my jacket, pharmacy socks on her feet, and looked around with tired curiosity. She did not judge it. That might have been worse. She only said my place looked like a man who owned exactly one decorative opinion and had filed it under emergency use only. I told her that was unfair, because I also had a plant in the kitchen. She looked toward the windowsill, saw the struggling basil, and said she would pray for it. I gave her the hospital sweatshirt because it was the safest piece of clothing I owned and also the most dangerous once she put it on. It was faded navy, soft from too many washes, with the name of the medical center cracked across the chest. I handed it to her without looking like I was imagining anything, because I had some pride left, and pointed her toward the bathroom. While she changed, I made tea badly. I was good with trauma carts, imaging equipment, difficult patients, and friends who needed rides after bad breakups. T was somehow where my competence ended. When she came back wearing the sweatshirt over her dress, sleeves covering half her hands, hair loosened around her shoulders, I had to turn toward the kettle like it had asked me a serious question. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Vesper had spent her life being watched by men who wanted to own the room, and somehow she still knew the difference between being looked at and being seen. She sat on the couch with the mug between both hands, and for a few minutes we let the quiet do its work. My phone was on the counter, screen down, which did not make Bram disappear but made him less bright. Vesper's phone had gone silent, maybe because everyone upstairs had finally decided panic could wait until morning. I asked if she needed food, and she said she needed the kind of food that came with no questions and no family speeches. I found crackers, string cheese, and one apple that had survived the week out of spite. She looked at the plate and said the ER had clearly shaped me into a man prepared for medical emergencies, but not hospitality. I told her I could offer a pudding cup if she signed a waiver. That made her laugh, and the sound loosened something in the room that I had not realized was holding its breath. Then she looked around again, slower this time, and asked if I liked living here. I gave the standard answer. It was close to the hospital, rent was manageable, parking was not a blood sport. Vesper smiled faintly and said that was not what she asked. That was how the night shifted from refuge into exposure. I told her I did not think much about liking it. It worked. Things that worked had always seemed good enough to me. She ran one thumb along the mug and said that sounded lonely. I almost deflected. It rose automatically. Some joke about having a thriving relationship with a microwave. But I had already said too much in the parking lot, and she had already trusted me with too much silence. So I told her maybe it was lonely, but lonely was easier when it looked practical. A bare wall could be called minimal. An empty apartment could be called efficient. A man could spend years being the calm one and call it personality. Vesper's expression softened, and I hated how much I wanted it to. I told her being safe was what people liked about me, until they wanted someone else. She did not interrupt, so I kept going, even though every sentence felt like handing her tools she could use to dismantle me. I told her about the women who called me when they needed a ride home, a couch for one night, someone to sit in the ER waiting room, someone who would not make things worse. I had been trusted often, which sounded almost like being loved if you did not listen too closely. But eventually they went back to men who made them feel chosen in louder ways, and I stayed the person they thanked, not the person they stayed for. Vesper looked at me like I had just described a wound she had already guessed was there. She said safety was not boring when the rest of your life felt like a room full of locked exits. The sentence landed with a force that embarrassed me. I looked at her, really looked, and she did not look away. The sweatshirt made her seem softer, but nothing about her felt weak. She was exhausted, angry, barefoot in my apartment after hiding in my car, and still somehow more honest than anyone upstairs at that hotel had allowed her to be all night. She told me she hid in my car because I never made her feel like a problem waiting to be solved. I asked if she was sure about that, because my entire personality had been built around solving problems. She said yes, but I solved things without trying to own the person attached to them. That was different. Then she added, quietly, that when she was around me, she did not feel managed. She felt like she could breathe and still decide what happened next. I should have said something brave. Instead, I made the couch up for her because bedding was safer than truth. I gave her a blanket, found an extra pillow, and told her I would take the chair or the floor. She gave me a look and said if I tried to sleep on the floor in my own apartment, she would tell Bram I had a martyr problem and poor furniture planning. I told her Bram already knew both. The joke helped, but only a little. As she settled onto the couch, she looked smaller than she had at the hotel and more real than I was prepared for. Before I turned off the lamp, she said my name. I looked back. She told me she did not ask to stay because she was scared of Lowen. Not only that, she asked because she trusted me. I nodded like that sentence had not just rearranged half my chest. When she finally fell asleep, I sat in the kitchen with the light off and my phone in my hand. Bram had texted 4 times. The latest one said, "Tell me she's okay if you know anything." I typed and deleted 6 versions because every honest answer sounded like betrayal and every careful answer sounded like a lie. At last, I wrote only, "She's safe." I stared at it for a full minute, then sent it. The reply came almost instantly. "With you?" I looked toward the couch, where Vesper slept in my sweatshirt with one hand tucked under her cheek, and understood that morning was going to ask for everything the night had let us avoid. Morning arrived like it had no respect for complicated nights. I had been awake for almost an hour by the time the first pale light reached the living room, sitting at my kitchen table with my phone face down and a mug of coffee I had not really tasted. Vesper was still asleep on the couch, curled under the blanket with one sleeve of my hospital sweatshirt pulled over her hand. She looked younger like that, not childish, just unguarded in a way I knew she would hate if she realized I had noticed. The woman at the hotel had been all satin, posture, and controlled exits. The woman on my couch had kicked off one pharmacy sock in her sleep and tucked her injured heel under the blanket like she was hiding from the whole world, one body part at a time. I should not have found that tender. I did anyway, and that was exactly why Bram's text sat on my phone like a warning label. I finally picked it up and read his message again. "With you?" There were 100 ways to answer, and every one of them sounded wrong. If I said yes, I betrayed Vesper's request for one night before becoming everyone's problem. If I said no, I betrayed Bram and the truth sitting 10 feet from me in my sweatshirt. If I said nothing, I did what men always did when a woman's choice made them uncomfortable. Waited until someone louder decided for her. I was still staring at the screen when Vesper stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, then sharpened as she remembered where she was. For 1 second, she looked peaceful. Then the world came back, and she sat up too quickly, pushing her hair out of her face, scanning the room as if the night might have left evidence on every surface. I told her it was just after 7. She nodded, then saw my phone in my hand and said, "Bram?" I told her he knew she was safe, and he suspected she was with me. That was the gentlest version of the truth, and even that made her close her eyes. She looked tired again, but not the same kind of tired as last night. Last night had been escape. Morning was consequence. I asked her what she wanted me to say, and she looked at me with a small, sad impatience. She said she was tired of people asking what she wanted, only after building the room around what they were willing to allow. That landed clean. I set the phone down and told her I was asking because this was her story first. She softened at that, but only a little, because softness had become expensive for her. She said Bram should know she was with me, but not because I was returning her like something borrowed, not because I was making a statement, not because I was apologizing for opening the door. "Tell him I chose where I went," she said, and then she looked down at the sweatshirt like she had just remembered how much that choice would look like something else from the outside. We had breakfast because apparently humans still required toast during emotional collapse. My coffee was terrible, which Vesper informed me with more mercy than it deserved. I burned the first piece of toast because I was distracted, then claimed I had been going for texture. She said charcoal was not a texture. It was a cry for help. The joke should have eased things, and for a few seconds it did. She sat at my counter in my sweatshirt, bare knees tucked under the hem of her dress, hair loose around her shoulders, holding the mug with both hands. It felt too natural. That was the problem. Emergencies were supposed to feel temporary. This felt like a morning that had been waiting behind a door neither of us had opened before. I poured more coffee into her cup without asking, and she noticed. She looked at me over the rim, and the quiet between us said more than either of us could safely name. Then someone knocked on my apartment door with enough force to make subtlety file a complaint. Vesper flinched, not badly, but enough that I hated whoever had made her body expect trouble from sound. I knew before I opened it. Bram stood in the hallway wearing yesterday's dress shirt under a jacket, his hair still damp like he had showered too fast, his eyes locked on mine with the kind of fear that had already converted itself into anger for easier transport. He looked past me and saw Vesper standing near the kitchen, still in my sweatshirt. His face changed. Relief first, quick and raw, then suspicion. Then the older brother fury he probably thought was love in its most useful form. He said her name, then mine. Mine sounded like a door he was deciding whether to kick open. I stepped aside because keeping him in the hallway would only make this worse. Bram walked in. but he did not come at me. I gave him credit for that. His eyes moved around the room, taking inventory. The folded blanket on the couch, the pharmacy bag on the coffee table, Vesper's heels near the door, my sweatshirt on her body. I could almost hear the conclusions forming. I told him she needed somewhere safe last night, and I gave her that. Nothing more. The words were true, but they were also too clean, and Vesper heard it. She stepped forward before Bram could answer, her chin lifting in that way I had seen at the hotel when she was holding herself together by force. She said she hid in my car because she chose to, and she came upstairs because she asked to stay. Bram told her she was upset, vulnerable, not thinking clearly, and the second he said it, I saw regret flash across his face because he sounded too much like everyone she had run from. Vesper did not raise her voice. Somehow that made her stronger. She told Bram she loved him, but she was tired of being treated like her choices became symptoms whenever they made the family uncomfortable. She said Lowen managed her with concern, Calla managed her with reputation, and Bram managed her with protection, but all of it still left her feeling handled instead of heard. Bram looked wounded, and I understood that too. He was not trying to own her. He was trying not to lose her. But people could hurt you with good intentions if they held them too tightly. I kept quiet because this was not mine to win. Bram looked at me finally and asked if I had feelings for his sister. The room went so still that even the refrigerator seemed to lower its voice. I could have lied. I could have said this was not about that. Instead, I said this was not the morning to make her night about me. Bram stared at me for a long second, and Vesper looked down like that answer had protected her and hurt her at the same time. When she left with Bram, she did it because she chose to, not because he collected her. That distinction mattered, even if it did not make the room feel less empty after the door closed. Before she stepped out, she turned back and thanked me, but the words sounded smaller than what had passed between us. I nodded because anything else might have been too much. Then she walked down the hallway with her brother beside her, wearing her dress again, my sweatshirt folded over one arm, and the careful face of a woman preparing to explain herself to people who had already written half the explanation. I stood there long after the elevator doors closed. When I finally turned back toward the couch, I saw the sweatshirt was not folded as neatly as I thought. A piece of paper had slipped from inside the sleeve onto the cushion. It was torn from the back of a hotel program, and the handwriting was Vesper's. I didn't ask to stay because I was scared of him. I asked because I trust you. I read Vesper's note so many times that morning the paper started to soften at the fold. I told myself I kept it because throwing it away would have been rude, which was a ridiculous lie even by my standards. I kept it because the sentence had gone straight through every category I had tried to put her in. Bram's sister, Lowen's ex, a woman in trouble, a woman I should respect from a distance. None of those labels survived the way she had written trust you. Like trust was not a polite word but a hand reaching back from the doorway. I tucked the note into the inside pocket of my work bag before heading to the hospital, then spent the rest of the day pretending not to feel it there against my ribs. The ER did not care about my emotional life, which was one of the things I usually appreciated about it. Fluorescent lights, ringing phones, carts rattling down hallways, nurses speaking in code that sounded like weather reports from a very tired country. I moved patients in and out of imaging, adjusted machines, explained scans to people who were scared and trying not to be, and answered the same 3 questions with the calm voice I had spent years perfecting. Calm was useful there. Calm mattered. A man with steady hands could make a room less frightening. But all day, I kept thinking about Vesper's line from the night before, about asking to stay because she trusted me, and how trust could become another place to hide if I never admitted I wanted more than to be trusted. During a 5-minute break, I pulled out the note behind the staff lockers, read it again like an idiot, and nearly got caught by a nurse named Paloma, who asked if I was reading secret discharge instructions from my feelings. Meanwhile, Vesper had gone back to the Ashbourne Hotel and stepped directly into the kind of quiet punishment rich rooms did best. She told me later that no one yelled. That would have been easier. Instead, people paused when she entered. The front desk manager looked at her shoes before looking at her face. 2 vendors stopped whispering too late near the ballroom doors. Lowen had sent flowers, of course. White orchids in a glass vase with a card that said he hoped she felt steadier today and that he was ready to talk when she was. It was written like an apology by someone who expected it to be displayed. Vesper stared at the card long enough for her assistant to ask if she wanted the flowers moved somewhere private. She said no, then carried the whole arrangement to the employee break room and set it beside the microwave, where later someone apparently spilled soup near it. I liked that detail more than was mature. Calla called before lunch. Vesper knew it would happen. Mothers who valued appearances had excellent timing for emotional audits. Calla did not ask if she was okay first. She asked whether Vesper understood how alarming last night had looked, then softened her voice in that way that made pressure sound like concern. She told Vesper to think carefully before making decisions that could make the family look unstable, especially with Lowen's circle already asking questions. Vesper said she was not a press release. Calla sighed and told her not to be dramatic. That word again. Dramatic. Difficult. Overwhelmed. Unstable. All the soft cages people built when a woman stopped stepping where they pointed. Vesper hung up before she said something that would become the next family emergency, then spent 20 minutes rearranging place cards for a bridal tasting with hands that would not stop shaking. She came to my apartment after my shift ended, and I knew before she spoke that this visit was different. No satin dress, no hiding under a dashboard, no rain in her hair. She wore dark trousers, a cream blouse, and the kind of tired eyes that came from surviving a day full of polished people. When I opened the door, she held up my hospital sweatshirt, folded neatly, and said she was returning stolen property before I filed a report. I told her the sweatshirt had seen worse crimes, mostly involving cafeteria chili. She smiled, but the smile had weight behind it. I stepped aside, then immediately wondered whether doing that looked too eager or not eager enough. Vesper noticed the hesitation. She walked in anyway, because apparently both of us had agreed to keep making doors complicated. For a while, we pretended this was about the sweatshirt. She placed it on the back of my couch. I asked if she wanted tea. She said yes, then asked if it would be terrible. I told her almost certainly, but I had improved from actively offensive to legally acceptable. That earned a real laugh, and for a moment the room remembered the night before without flinching. Then she looked at the couch, at the spot where she had slept, and said she had wanted to know whether it only mattered because she was falling apart. I turned from the kitchen counter. She did not look fragile now. She looked deliberate, which scared me more. She said crisis made people generous, and fear made people honest in ways they sometimes regretted by daylight. She wanted to know if I regretted letting her stay. I said no too quickly, then realized quickness could sound like reflex instead of truth. So I said it again, slower. No, I did not regret it. Her shoulders eased, but only slightly. She asked if I had told Bram that. I told her Bram and I had not talked since morning. That was true, and also cowardly. She heard both pieces. Vesper stepped closer to the counter and asked if I was avoiding her brother, Lowen's shadow, or her. I tried to answer like a decent man. I said Bram was my best friend, and I did not want to turn his sister's worst night into something messy. Vesper's eyes sharpened. She said her life was already messy, and she was tired of men using neatness as a reason to place her somewhere safer for them. That one hit hard enough to make me quiet. She looked at me, not angry exactly, but hurt in a way she was too proud to hand over fully. She said she came back because she wanted to see whether I could look at her when she was not hiding, not shaking, not cornered by Lowen, not asking for rescue, just standing there, choosing my door in ordinary shoes. I wanted to tell her I had been thinking about her all day. I wanted to pull the note from my bag and show her that her words had followed me through hospital corridors and into every quiet second I had tried to avoid. Instead, because fear is a talented thief, I said I was trying to do the right thing. Vesper looked almost sad then. She said, "Is that why you want me to leave, Sullivan? Because it's right? Or because wanting me means you finally have to stop being only the decent guy?" I had no answer good enough. Not yet. And the worst part was that she knew it before I did. Vesper stood in my apartment wearing ordinary shoes and asking a question that did not feel ordinary at all. The hospital sweatshirt lay folded on the back of my couch between us like evidence from the night before, and I stood near the kitchen counter with both hands around a mug I did not want, trying to look like a man with principles instead of a man hiding behind them. She had asked if I wanted her to leave because it was right, or because wanting her meant I had to stop being only the decent guy. I could have given her the kind of answer people respected. I could have said Bram was my best friend, that timing mattered, that she had been through too much with Lowen, that I did not want to confuse safety with attraction. All of that was true. None of it was the whole truth. The whole truth was that I had spent years being chosen as the calm option in someone else's emergency and then left behind once the real life started again. Vesper looking at me like I might be more than that scared me more than any accusation Bram could make. I told her I did not want her to leave. The words came out quieter than I meant them to, but they were clean. Vesper's face changed, not into victory, not into relief exactly, but into something wary and wounded, like she had learned not to trust the first honest thing too quickly. She asked why I kept acting like wanting her was something I needed to apologize for. I looked toward the window because looking at her made it hard to keep any answer orderly. Outside, traffic moved along the wet street, headlights sliding across the glass like somebody else's life passing by. I told her because wanting her had consequences. Bram had trusted me for years. Her family already treated her choices like weather they needed to control. Lowen was still circling the story, waiting for any reason to make her look reckless. Vesper listened, arms folded loosely, then said she understood consequences. Sullivan. She had been living inside other people's consequences for years. That was when she started telling me what I had never let myself believe. She said she had noticed me long before the hotel garage, not in a dramatic way, not like some secret movie playing behind every family cookout, but in small moments that kept adding up while I was busy pretending I did not matter. She noticed how I left parties before they became performances, how I always stood near the edge of a room but somehow saw who needed water, who needed space, who needed someone to change the subject. She remembered the night Bram's father was in the hospital and I told the charge nurse the room number before Bram could find the paper in his pocket. She remembered me bringing coffee to the waiting room and handing it to Kala without making a speech about being helpful. She said I spoke to tired nurses like their exhaustion mattered, and I never looked at women like they were prizes to win or problems to manage. Every sentence stripped another layer off the safe little lie I had lived with, the one where I was invisible unless someone needed me. I tried to deflect because I am, unfortunately, consistent. I told her she made me sound better than I was, and she stepped closer before I could turn that into a joke. She said no. I made myself sound smaller than I was because it was easier than admitting I wanted to be chosen. The room went very still. I looked at her then, really looked, at the tiredness under her eyes, at the stubborn set of her mouth, at the woman who had come back to my door without rain, without Lowen behind her, without an emergency strong enough to excuse either of us. She told me she did not hide in my car because she had nowhere else. She knew exactly where Bram was. She knew how to call a ride. She knew how to walk back upstairs and become the manageable daughter again if she had wanted to survive the evening that way. She hid there because my car was the one place she knew nobody would force her back into someone else's version of her life. I felt that in a place deeper than attraction, though attraction was there, sharp and undeniable now. I told her I had wanted her too. Once I started, the words did not come smoothly, but maybe smooth would have been wrong. I told her I wanted her at Bram's cookouts when she rolled her eyes at Lowen's name before she learned to hide it better. I wanted her in hospital hallways when she asked questions nobody else asked. I wanted her at the hotel before the whole night went bad, when she stood under those ballroom lights, looking like someone everyone admired and no one actually listened to. I told her I had buried it under loyalty, timing, and the idea that women like her eventually chose men like Lowen because men like him knew how to take up a room, and men like me mostly knew how to get people safely out of one. Vesper's eyes softened, but she did not let me make it self-pity. She said Lowen took up rooms because he was afraid of anyone else breathing in them. I gave people exits. That was not smaller. That was why she came. She was close enough then that I could see the faint crease where the hotel program note had probably been folded in her hand before she left it for me. I wanted to touch her face. I wanted to take the last step and stop having this conversation from opposite sides of every rule I had built. Vesper's gaze dropped to my mouth, and the room narrowed so quickly I forgot the mug still sitting behind me on the counter. I said her name, not as a warning this time, more like surrender arriving late. She did not move away. Her hand lifted first, fingers brushing the front of my shirt, not pulling, not asking loudly, just making contact with the truth both of us had been circling. I leaned closer before I had decided to, and for 1 second there was no Bram, no Lowen, no charity event, no older brother's trust sitting heavy between my shoulder blades. There was only Vesper looking at me like safe had become something she wanted to step toward. Then I stopped, barely an inch away, close enough that I felt her breath shift. The hurt crossed her face before I spoke, and I hated myself for causing it, even though I still believed some part of the restraint was right. I told her I wanted to kiss her more than I wanted to be careful, which was exactly why I had to be careful. I would not let our first kiss happen while Bram thought I had betrayed him, while Lowen's shadow was still standing in the room, while she was still fighting to prove her own choices were hers. Vesper stepped back slowly, her hand falling from my shirt. She did not look angry at first. She looked tired, and that was worse. She said maybe one day I would learn the difference between protecting her and putting her back behind glass. Then she picked up the hospital sweatshirt from the couch, held it against her chest for 1 quiet second, and set it back down. When she walked out, she did not slam the door. She did not need to. The silence after her did the work. Bram asked me to meet him the next evening at a bar near the hospital, which was how I knew he was trying not to punch me. If Bram Dempsey wanted a fight, he did not schedule it around parking availability. He picked a quiet place with dark booths, bad wings, and a bartender who looked like he had heard every version of male stupidity and charged extra for eye contact. I got there first, because apparently guilt made me punctual, and sat with a glass of water while trying to decide how many ways a man could say he had feelings for his best friend's sister without sounding like the villain in his best friend's life. Bram came in wearing a work jacket, jaw tight, eyes tired. He sat across from me and did not order anything for a full minute. Then he said, "Tell me I'm wrong." I asked about what, even though we both knew. He looked at me like I had insulted both of us by pretending, and said, "About you and Vesper. There are answers that protect you, and answers that respect the person you are speaking about. They are not always the same." I could have said nothing happened, which was true physically and useless emotionally. I could have said she was upset, and I helped her, which made me sound clean and made her sound helpless. I could have said I was sorry, which was also true but too small for the room. Instead, I told Bram I had feelings for her. His face did not change much, but his hand tightened around the edge of the table. I kept going before fear could make me polite. I told him I had not touched her, not because I did not want to, but because I refused to turn the worst night she had had in a long time into something she would have to defend later. Bram stared at me, and for once his anger looked confused, like it had expected a simpler enemy. He asked how long. That was the question I had been avoiding even with myself. I told him I did not know when it started exactly. Maybe when she asked me in the hospital hallway if I ever got tired of being calm. Maybe when she remembered my schedule better than people I had actually dated. Maybe every time she walked into a room and looked like she was waiting for someone to ask what she wanted instead of telling her what she should do. Bram looked away toward the bar, and I could see the brother in him fighting the friend. He said she had been through enough with Lowen, enough with Kala turning every feeling into family optics, enough with people wanting pieces of her. I said I knew. He snapped back that no, I did not, because wanting someone did not automatically mean I was good for her. That hit clean because it was true. I told him he was right. Then I told him the part he needed to hear most. Vesper was not a mistake I was trying to justify. She was a woman making choices everyone kept treating like symptoms. That changed the room between us. Not peace, not approval, but the first crack in the wall. Bram rubbed both hands over his face and said he hated that I sounded reasonable. I told him I hated it too, because it made me seem calmer than I felt. He almost smiled, then did not. His phone buzzed on the table. He looked at the screen, and whatever softness had nearly arrived disappeared. He said Lowen was at the Ashbourne. Vesper had a vendor meeting there, and apparently Lowen had decided to stop by with concern, which was a phrase that should have required a license. Bram stood. I stood too. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the exact moment he decided whether to shut me out or let me show up. He said, "If you make this worse, I swear to God." I told him I would not speak for her. He said, "Good, but don't let him either." The Ashbourne lobby was all marble floors, tall flowers, and expensive silence, the kind of place where emotional damage wore polished shoes. We found Vesper near the side ballroom with a small group of hotel staff and vendors holding a folder against her chest. Calla stood nearby, pale and composed. Lowen was in front of them, speaking gently enough that anyone passing would assume he was the injured party. He said Vesper's disappearance had worried everyone, that he understood she felt overwhelmed, but turning private issues into public confusion was not fair to the people who loved her. I saw her face. Not broken. Worse. Familiar with the shape of the trap. If she got angry, he would look patient. If she stayed quiet, he would define the story. Bram started forward, but I touched his arm. He stopped. Barely. Vesper saw us then. Her eyes landed on Bram first, then on me, and the pain that crossed her face almost made me step back because I had caused some of it. Lowen followed her gaze and smiled like my arrival completed his argument. He said this was exactly the kind of confusion he meant. Vesper's association with people outside the family, people who might not understand the situation, had made things harder. He did not say my name. He did not need to. Calla looked mortified, which made me angrier than Lowen did. Not because she hated her daughter, but because she kept choosing embarrassment over understanding. I walked closer, slow enough that Vesper could stop me if she wanted. She did not. I told Lowen that leaving a room where people were trying to shame her into obedience was not instability. It was judgment. The lobby went quiet in that sharp hotel way, where everyone still had jobs but suddenly cared deeply about the floor pattern. Lowen gave a short laugh and said I was very noble for someone who had inserted himself into a family matter. I told him I had done the opposite. I opened a car door, then an apartment door, and let Vesper decide what came next. I did not drag her back upstairs. I did not call her confused. I did not turn her refusal into a medical condition with better lighting. His face hardened, just a little, and that was the first honest expression I had seen on him. Then I looked at Vesper, because the rest was for her, not him. I said she was never my emergency. She was the woman I wanted before she hid in my car, before the charity event, before Lowen gave me a socially acceptable reason to care. My voice did not shake, which surprised me. I said I had been hiding behind loyalty, timing, and decency because it was easier than admitting I wanted someone who might actually choose me back. Vesper's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Bram stood beside me, silent, not approving exactly, but not stopping me either. Lowen said her name once, sharp under the polish. Vesper turned to him and said no. Just no. It was the smallest word in the lobby and somehow the strongest thing there. Lowen left because men like him knew when a room had stopped obeying. Calla followed him with her eyes, but did not move. Bram exhaled like he had been holding his breath for 3 days. Vesper stepped closer to me, close enough that I could see the tremor in her hand around the folder. For a second, I thought she might touch me. She did not. Instead, she asked softly if I had said it because I meant it, or because I was tired of watching everyone else decide who she belonged to. I did not answer Vesper in the lobby because I had finally learned that the loudest room was usually the worst place to tell the whole truth. Lowen had just walked away. Calla was standing near the ballroom doors with one hand at her throat like reputation had become a physical object she needed to hold in place. And Bram looked like a man who had aged 3 years and 10 minutes but still might choose violence if anyone said the wrong thing. Vesper stood in front of me with that folder clutched against her chest, asking if I meant what I said or if I was only tired of watching other people decide who she belonged to. The answer was yes to both, but that was not enough. She deserved more than a brave sentence tossed into a hotel lobby because another man had finally made me angry enough to stop hiding. So I told her I meant it, but I wanted to answer somewhere the walls were not listening. She looked hurt for half a second before she understood. Maybe not fully, but enough to nod. Bram stepped closer, not between us this time, just near enough to remind me that friendship did not disappear because love had entered the room. I told him I would call him. He said I had better, then looked at Vesper and asked if she wanted him to stay. She shook her head. That mattered. Bram heard it too. He did not like it, but he respected it, and for the first time since she had hidden in my car, I saw him choose trust over control. Calla tried to say something about going home and discussing everything calmly, but Vesper turned to her with a tired gentleness that somehow had more force than anger. She said there would be nothing calm about pretending everyone else got a vote before she did. Then she walked away from the ballroom, from her mother, from the staff pretending not to watch, and from the polished life Lowen kept trying to hand back to her like she had simply dropped it. I found her later in the parking garage, near the same concrete pillar where my car had been parked that first night. The hotel above us still hummed with expensive noise, but down there everything sounded distant, like another life happening underwater. Vesper was not hiding this time. She stood beside my car with her arms folded, hair tucked behind one ear, the black folder gone, her face tired but clear. When she saw me, she did not step toward me right away. I was grateful for that. We had spent too much time moving around each other under pressure. I wanted this moment to have room to breathe. I stopped a few feet away and told her I had meant every word. I had wanted her before the garage, before the charity event, before Lowen gave me an excuse to look protective. I wanted her at Bram's cookouts, in hospital hallways, in every small conversation that ended too early because I remembered who her brother was and who I was supposed to be. Vesper's eyes stayed on mine. She asked why I had stopped myself in my apartment, and this time I did not give her the polished version first. I told her I had stopped because part of me was trying to respect her, yes, but part of me was terrified. If I kissed her while everything was messy, I could tell myself it was the night, the pressure, the rescue, the confusion. But if I waited until she stood in front of me clearly, choosing without rain or panic or Lowen's voice in the room, then I would have to believe she really wanted me. Not just the calm man, not just the safe ride, not just Bram's dependable friend with a car and a spare sweatshirt. Me. Vesper's expression softened in a way that made the garage feel less cold. She said she did not want a rescuer, a secret, or a man who treated her like Bram's little sister forever. She wanted me to open the door and trust that she was choosing the seat beside me. I looked at my car then, the same ordinary Honda she had hidden in like it was the only place in the city where she could breathe. The passenger seat was empty now, the window catching the pale garage light, and for once it did not look like a hiding place. It looked like a choice waiting to be made honestly. I told her I could do that, but then I stopped, because could still sounded too safe. I told her I wanted to do that. I wanted to learn her without managing her, protect her without owning the story, stand beside her without asking Bram's friendship to become a prison for both of us. I said I would talk to him, not for permission, but because friendship deserved honesty. And I would talk to her first, always, because love that spoke around her instead of to her would be no better than the life she had walked away from. Vesper's hands loosened from where they had been folded across her ribs. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the exhaustion under her eyes and the hope she was trying not to hand me too quickly. I asked if I could kiss her. The question made her smile, not because it was uncertain, but because it was hers to answer. She said yes, Sullivan, and this time I did not stop an inch away. I kissed her beside the car where she had first asked to stay with me, and the kiss did not feel like rescue or rebellion or revenge against Lowen. It felt like two people finally stepping out of everyone else's version of the story. Her hand came to my chest, my fingers settled at her waist, and for the first time in years, being safe did not feel like the consolation prize. It felt like the place she had chosen on purpose. The months after that were not instantly simple, because real life rarely rewards honesty with clean paperwork. Bram needed time. He and I had one brutal conversation, then another better one, then a third one over burgers where he finally admitted that hating the idea of me with Vesper was easier than admitting she had grown past his protection. Calla did not transform overnight either, but she learned that Vesper's silence had never meant agreement. Lowen became less a threat than a bad echo, one that faded every time Vesper chose a room without checking whether his shadow approved. As for me, I stopped pretending decency meant distance. Sometimes decency meant telling the truth before fear could make it noble. Sometimes loyalty meant trusting the people you loved to survive choices you did not control. Vesper still worked late hotel events, still carried emergency flats in her bag, and still had a gift for making wealthy brides believe greenery could heal family dysfunction. I still worked ER shifts, still drove the same car, and still got teased by nurses who somehow knew my emotional life had improved before I told them anything. The car became our private joke. Sometimes, after a long night, Vesper would slide into the passenger seat, buckle herself in, and say she was not hiding, just conducting a romantic quality inspection. I would tell her the seat had excellent references. She would say the driver was tolerable. Then she would reach for my hand before I pulled out of the garage. One night, months after the charity event, I picked her up from the Ashbourne after another wedding. She came down to the garage in a silver gray dress, tired and beautiful, holding her heels in one hand because she had finally stopped suffering for elegance when no one important was watching. She opened the passenger door, sat down beside me, and looked over with that dangerous, almost smile that still made me forget traffic laws. "Can I stay with you?" she asked. This time, there was no panic in it, no hiding, no Lowen upstairs, no family emergency, no missed calls glowing between us. I took her hand and said, "You already do." And when she leaned across the console to kiss me, I understood that sometimes the safest place in the world is not where you run because you have nowhere else to go. It is where you return because someone finally knows how to let you choose. Do you think loyalty to a friend should stop someone from loving the right person, or does real loyalty mean telling the truth before it turns into regret? And can being someone's safe place become real romance when they choose you in daylight, not just in crisis? Tell me what you think in the comments. If this story made you feel something, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.